Next on OPB.
Okay, we're on.
Okay.
How can we
Oh,
participate?
you're on that page, all right.
Oh, yes, I'll speak to that.
Okay.
Okay, so the only item on
pencil us
the,
in. That's what I was saying.
I'm gonna,
What?
Tim, you're a rare form
Don't you love
tonight.
Yes, I like that.
Smack.
Right?
Exactly.
5 points right off the bat.
Thank you.
Okay, so the only thing on our work session agenda is the fence policy. We talked about this last meeting. Just to give you a reminder and an overview, there are a number of historic review board policies, and the purpose of those is to give staff a little bit of purview to make staff level decisions if they meet these policies, so that everything doesn't have to come to the board and be a longer process for community members who want to make improvements to their properties. So the fence policies are more than 30 years old, and we're looking to update them along with some of the other policies that we will discuss at future work sessions. After we kind of have initial discussions at the board, I plan to take draft policies to the neighborhood associations, Kenema and McLaughlin. I plan to mail out kind of invitations and information to everyone that owns historic properties in the city, and have an open house, to invite them to an open house. And then we would come back, we get community input, revise policy based on that input, and then we'd come back to the board for a hearing to adopt a new policy. So Paul, that's kind of how we want to engage the community allow people to participate.
What's wrong?
I have a point of procedural information for you. The policies were updated during the time that I worked for the city, so they are not 30 years old.
Okay.
Some of them are.
Some of them are,
Yes,
right,
but
yeah.
the fence policy, roofing policy, and what other, they were updated.
Yeah, they've been amended, some of them. Paul, did you hear my summary of how we're going to engage the community in this?
Where you're gonna go out after.
So after this meeting, sometime we'll have an open house, we'll attend the neighborhood association meetings, and we'll, allow for input, people can contact me personally, as well.
Now.
Oh, well, I think if the board wants to take public comment during the work session, we can do that, or we can save it for the public hearing, or the meeting at 7:30, that public comment session. So that would be up to the board.
Depends on how much time, the information that we're discussing as to, how much time we have.
Yeah, so we have, the regular meeting starts at 7:30, and we have a break for dinner. So I think we should probably end the work session no later than, I think 7:10, 7:15. So if you'd like to allow for public comment within the hour and 10 minutes of that, then you can.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I have a question, if I may.
you may.
Anyway, I suspect that everybody knows who I am, so Denise McGriff and Ray, I'll meet you later. But anyway, I would like to make a suggestion. With all due respect to Kelly, having a discussion with you that gets very procedural with regard to public testimony is not really the way that I would like to suggest that we go about doing this. I think we need to have a discussion. I think it would be helpful to be able to chat with you just informally about the policies. Our neighborhood association has not really had a chance to really look at this over.
Nor has ours.
Right, so I'm here basically because I'm probably the most familiar person in our, well, besides you, neighborhood
Been around for a while.
neighborhood person on the official level.
Yeah,
that is
I want
familiar
to
with
make
this.
it clear here that
Yeah, I'm not
we don't
testifying.
intend to finalize
Right, no, I know
anything
that.
tonight.
I know
We're
that.
at the very beginning of this
I know
process.
that, but what I would like to suggest is that if there's some possibility to have some give and take, because obviously you're very familiar with my background and you know that I was a staff for Historic Review Board. I've been staffs for Historic Review Boards since my planning career began. I won't say when, but let's just say I have a considerable amount of experience, and this is an area that I have a lot of expertise in, having gone through what you're going through right now. And I think there's got to be a little bit different way, because Historic Review Board has always been done things just a little bit differently because of the nature of what we're dealing with. We're dealing, with people's homes, people's properties, and they get a little, and John knows, they get a little cranky sometimes. So I'm hoping that in addition to talking with staff, that there's an opportunity on a more informal basis that's still within the purview of the public meetings laws and all of that, that people can actually talk to you and we can say, hey, did you think about this? Did you think about that? Where it's always, the way we have to do public testimony when we're dealing with procedures is, I say something, you say thank you.
Thank you.
There's not a lot of give and take. And I think when I come back, I can explain to you where the McLaughlin neighborhood is coming from and where, because this was a request of ours almost 2 years ago to Christina. So I'm glad we're getting there. But again, because it's dealing with this sort of thing, and I have so much information that I would love to share with you about some of these different types of things, because I did a lot of research on all of this when we updated it before. So there's a lot of stuff that's new, but there's stuff that we dealt with, like the Gabion walls and those sort of things. So I'm just hoping that we can have a little less formality and have some discussion with you. So that's just my request.
Okay. I'd ask you to fill out a comment card just for the benefit of the people who take the minutes here for tonight. Thank you. Okay, where were we? The chart that I'm looking at here shows what can and cannot be approved at the staff level. Tell us about the colors on here while I try to figure them out.
Sure. So I know this is kind of small up on the screen, but what I've put together is a draft table with property types along the top in the columns, and then fence and wall materials along the side. And then in each cell is what level of review is needed for that fence on that type of property. As I filled this in, I want to be really clear that I expect this to change based on the board's opinion and public input. I kind of just, made a wild guess as to, what might be appropriate, but that's probably not the final answer. For example, first one, we have wrought iron. If somebody's proposing to put a wrought iron fence in a property type that's Group A, which is over in the left-hand side box, Craftsman Bungalow, then that would be an HRB decision. Staff couldn't approve that. So let's quickly just talk about the property types. Over in the box on the left-hand side, we have Group A, which is Craftsman Bungalow, Group B, Vernacular, Group C, Queen Anne. So those are our three main architectural styles in Oregon City. And then we've got commercial buildings, and then down, if you go way to the bottom, non-contributing. So in Kenema, the fence policy applies to all properties, even non-contributing properties. So there's a category for that. And then the other category has a long list of architectural styles. So some of those architectural styles, we only see 1 or 2 or 3 properties in the whole city that have that style. So they're not common, but they exist. At least one of that type exists according to our historic inventory forms. And so the board can, I actually recommend that we might take those and maybe categorize them into group A, B, or C, if they're more similar to a craftsman bungalow or a vernacular or a Queen Anne. Or we could create a group D and throw some in there, if that's appropriate. So I would recommend that maybe tonight we can maybe try and work on that. And then we can work through this table as well and kind of go through and decide if what's in there is appropriate. I also have a draft document with the definitions of each of these fence and wall materials. So we've got a definition and a couple photo examples of each. I noticed some errors and typos in that. And so I have some modifications that I can go through tonight. And then I'll take notes on any other modifications you'd like to make to it. So I'm happy to go through the definitions, or we can dive into this document here.
And I think,
I'm comfortable with the definitions now that I see the chart and everything.
and I think, with the others, like you were saying, to use kind of recategorizing some of them, like the Foursquare, I think would definitely fit like under craftsman bungalow, that type of, and then some, like the Italianate and Tudor. Do we have a Tudor in Oregon City?
I think there's one.
One?
Yeah, some of these, there's only one.
Okay.
Where did you say that would fit?
For the, like the Foursquare, I think, could be under, it's just a larger, I think a larger version of a craftsman or bungalow style.
Same with Prairie School.
I was just gonna say the same with Prairie School.
Okay.
Some of them like Mediterranean, that's kind of stands by its, that would come under other.
Yeah,
definitely.
well, and we can think about fencing and, the architectural styles might not be super similar, but if we think that the same style of fencing is appropriate for
Right,
them, then
right.
we can put it in the same category.
Like cottage, to me, that, the English cottage could be like under the I would say vernacular. I don't know what you guys are thinking. Or do you just want to go down the other? And just,
I think maybe group C could be
whoop,
I want to be there.
expanded to, mine still shows.
where?
To show Victorian and possibly Gothic revival at first pass, it seems like they would have similar compatibility in terms of the fencing.
For the vernacular?
No, with
the
the Queen Anne.
Queen Anne, okay, yeah.
Victorian
Right.
and Gothic revival, maybe
And
not quite
Italianate.
so much.
Italianate and stick
Stick can go with Queen Anne.
and Georgians
earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
I'm not
I don't see
familiar
a
with
Georgian
minimal
fitting
traditional.
into any of
Is that
those
just
three.
It's like 1940s,
in the
simple,
50? Okay.
single story.
Like a ranch in the 40s, is that what you're
Yeah,
thinking?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what. It's like the precursor to the
grandma's
ranch burger. Okay.
Levittown.
Utilitarian.
So right now, this is, when you disseminate the code for fences into a spreadsheet, this is pretty accurate?
It's not a lot of it is currently the policy, but we've got a lot more fence material types in this list. And then the current policy doesn't really have guidance on how that applies to different architectural styles. So this adds a lot of complexity, I guess, a little bit of
Yeah.
complexity. But it's generally, I think, it's similar to the current policy, but there might be some areas where I threw in like a staff
Sure.
approval where today wouldn't be. It was just my best wild guess as to what was appropriate, and you guys can amend it as needed. So to summarize what I just heard, I'm going to just go down the list of other. So Victorian goes into Group C with Queen Anne. Tudor, I didn't hear anything on that one.
I don't have an opinion on that one.
We could make a fourth group of other.
Other, yeah.
Okay.
Italian.
Italianate goes with Group C.
C.
Stick,
C.
Group C. English cottage,
Kind of,
It goes
B.
with tutor.
huh?
Does it go with tutor?
Or B, because vernacular is just, kind of your
yeah.
everyman's. It would look funny.
Yeah.
Well, we can create this Group D, and then if all of the fence, how we apply the fences to it is the same as one of the other groups, then we can just merge the groups.
True.
So I'll put English cottage in Group D, other.
Under D?
Yeah, we're creating a Group D other. Gothic revival in Group C.
C.
Yeah.
Foursquare in Group A. Classical revival.
Goes with Georgian.
It's a little earlier than Victorian,
I'd say kind of Victorian.
earlier than, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
More colonial revival, I guess was what I was thinking.
Kinda like
Not
Danes.
classical revival.
Yeah. D?
Classical revival in Georgian goes with our other group
Sure.
for now.
For now.
Okay. And Georgian colonial revival, same.
Same.
Minimal traditional.
You could put that with vernacular if it's what you're saying it is.
Okay.
I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then prairie school
Prairie
would be
school is-
A.
Yeah.
A, yeah.
Ranch would be
Ranch.
that, like ranch.
It would be what?
What did we just say, the minimal traditional, where did we put that?
Oh, and B with
Oh, B.
vernacular.
Yeah.
B, yeah.
So ranch. Mediterranean revival, other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other
Well, yeah.
Shed.
and
Do you,
utilitarian.
is there a shed that somebody put a fence around? I
It's
mean,
it's not a shed.
Oh,
I think shed is roof.
Shed roof. I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah,
I'm like,
but you-
to me, that would be a vernacular.
I think that's really a shed roof is just, it would be more of a modern, yeah, what do they, from the 50s. What do they call that style?
Mid-century.
Yes,
It's like a postmodern, yeah, it's a.
shed could be like mid-century.
But it,
So would that be maybe in Group B?
I don't know, because it's kind of, if that's what it is, it would be mid-century modern would go with ranch. Where did we put ranch?
We put ranch in Group B.
B?
Yeah, with vernacular.
I guess you could, I don't know, whoever. That's what I think of, a low-pitched roof. I don't know. Utilitarian, what are you thinking for that?
I think we could throw it somewhere. And we could
Probably
always.
erase it.
Describe what a utilitarian.
There is one or maybe a handful of properties that are
I would call,
Categorize as
I would call shed mid-century modern.
Yeah.
And I would probably put that maybe in with vernacular if you could.
Yeah.
But then the utilitarian, I think you just get rid of that. I mean, what is it? A
I
broom
can
closet?
take, I can look at
Like the
which,
Quonset hut?
I don't
even know what that is.
Which buildings it,
Well,
which properties it actually, there might only be one property and then we can.
Yeah, what does that look
at
like?
that.
I was saying like a Quonset hut, I mean, that's kind of,
No,
not much.
probably don't have any issues with that.
Okay, so I'll pull the inventory form on that for a later conversation.
So the shed we put under what?
Group B.
Yeah, and I'd call that mid-century. So under commercial, you've got Beaux-Arts,
Ozarks.
and other.
Yeah, they were just,
Do we deal with commercial
we do.
on Malala, on 7th?
Yeah.
Through that part of it, right?
If they wanted to put a fence up.
Right.
Nothing on Main Street or anything down in that corridor.
No,
Or unless it's something,
unless it's a landmark.
like its own thing.
Right.
Down that way.
Along Malala?
So,
I meant 7.
Yeah.
7.
Everything's right out to the street, the sidewalk. I mean, there's no,
yeah, there might be,
So why-
there might be
I
like some
don't
church.
There's
understand
some
why there would be.
on this side of the street, there's a couple of buildings that are commercial, that are houses that they
Right.
could do something.
There's commercial in Kenema as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Kenema,
That's true.
Right, and then,
Okay.
you know, there are churches and buildings like that aren't really residential that this would apply to.
Can't imagine a church putting up a.
So some of them might have front yard areas where they could put fences or walls.
Kenema has a lot.
Has what?
Kenema has a lot.
A lot, okay.
A lot
Commercials.
of it along 99 McLaughlin.
With a lot of
Also,
terrible chain link right now.
Commercial historic.
A lot of terrible everything right now.
Yeah.
Kenema.
Okay,
Okay.
so it sounds like we've gotten through that part. Would you all like to walk through the table then?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we'll start at the top, wrought iron. For bungalow and vernacular and the other types in those groups, it would be HRB approval. For Queen Anne,
I have a question. Oh, okay, for the Queen Anne.
for Queen Anne and for commercial, it would be staff could approve that.
What type of wrought iron though? Because with wrought iron, there's so many,
Queen Anne B.
possibilities. And some of
Yes.
them might not be, but then with staff, if you don't think it's appropriate, you can still.
Right.
Refer.
Right, but having some, so here's what we can, let's find wrought iron in here. Here we go. So here's what we have current as a draft definition and examples of wrought iron. So if we wanted to add more detail to this, that could be helpful. Because this includes simple and ornate.
Why can't I?
Here, you want to just look at this?
Mine's,
I'll grab a paper too if you want it.
I was gonna print it, but then I thought, I'll look through it. Oh, okay.
I do have a couple of hard copies.
Yeah, my computer is like, no.
I'm curious why
Oh,
wrought iron,
Thanks.
curious why staff approval of Group C, but not A and B, or vice versa, why HRB is required for A and B, but not C.
But why is it for
Well,
non-contributing?
because normally you wouldn't have a wrought iron fence like around a bungalow and stuff.
So I think, presumably staff approval means that it's common in that type.
Okay.
So they.
Right, it's appropriate, it's more appropriate for that
And
style.
HRB would mean that it's possible to comply with the style, but a little bit more,
Okay.
judgment
Okay.
there. And then not, unless the red is, that it's unlikely that it would.
So you'd have HRB for non-contributing on that, non-contributing within the districts.
Yeah, and I think the idea there is that non-contributing it like a cast or a wrought iron fence and a non-contributing would be a little bit too much.
Yeah.
You know, not, you know,
Sure.
not
You
that
want
it,
the HRB to deal with that.
yeah, that was the idea. But, you know, more than likely, we won't have anyone ever
No.
requesting to do that on a non-contributing property.
We have an example of Kenema that's mixed, both wood and wrought iron.
Yeah, and that's where we can clarify in the definition. Does it include mixed material or?
Where's that?
It's too much.
Did you want to comment, Paul, on what we're talking about now, or did you want to?
When it comes up,
You need to go up, but yeah.
Yeah, we let Denise talk, we'll let you talk.
Paul Edgar Kenema. Reed has an example of it at his house. So he's an iron worker, and so he's mixed a great deal of iron with wood. So I thought that would be an example of some place that somewhere somebody might want to say what is appropriate. Don't know.
Well, I've seen his new fence, but I didn't observe any wrought iron in it.
Well, the gates are all wrought iron.
Oh,
Yeah, he's got
okay.
some.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well,
So in sending the wrought iron and wrought iron masonry combinations to the HRB for groups A and B, I guess you're implying that there's a reasonable possibility that those might be inappropriate.
there's wood with.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a very rough draft and not a lot of time went into categorizing everything. So these might not make sense to you.
Makes sense to me. Only question would be on the non-contributing houses. Would you, if it's a vernacular non-contributing, would you use the vernacular guidelines, or if it's a bungalow non-contributing house? You know, they're new construction, but they were in that style. Do you follow the?
That's a good question. We could clarify that if you wanted the board to not be burdened with seeing all these requests for non-contributing, we could add a clarification that would say for new construction that's vernacular style or bungalow style, you know, consider it within the groups.
Yeah, because you still want them to be appropriate for the neighborhood and the district. You know, I mean, just because they're non-contributing doesn't mean that you get to put chain link up or something
Right.
like that, which you don't have down below anyway.
Yeah, chain link is down there.
Kind of figured it would.
Chain link's a big no
Yeah.
all the way through.
I don't think it should be in the neighborhood, period.
Steel or aluminum, black coated.
You know, I'd like to see
Concrete.
the chain link and the hedge slats and stuff. You know, you have it, that it would come to HRB. All the rest of them are all no's. I'd like to just see it all no's,
right
so
across.
that there's
I think
no,
so too.
so that there's no shades of gray that, oh, you're non-contributing, so you get to have chain link. And so I just think it should be no straight across, and they can come and try to plead their case, but.
I think it should say staff all the way across and all the way down.
Is that a motion?
Man, I'm all about quick and easy.
And there goes the neighborhood.
What, you're not putting any faith in staff? I put all of my faith in staff.
Yeah.
You could really play with this for hours and argue over this one and that one and what is that? It's like, goodness me. There's a lot of, you could take each fence, define all the variations of that fence, and then go to every group, and it's like, come on.
Yeah, and there's
This
still.
is government at its best. All I'm saying is simplify, man. But then
I
nobody.
agree with that, but I think we have a member of our studio audience who wants to say something.
Well, no one's going to agree with me, but I had to say it.
No, I agree with you. So I see, okay, so
You
most
think
of.
so, Denise? I have so much faith in staff and that if there's going to be an issue, it's going to come before this board regardless of what this is. You can keep everything status quo. And then you can have people that'll come to the board and argue over a fence and we go through it and then someone might bring up, well, you really need to update that policy. Well, you could update the policy, but it's never going to please everybody. You can keep things status quo and it's not going to please everyone. I could say, look, make it all staff and keep it simple. And if there's an issue, bring it to the board. That's the simplest thing. But I'm just.
I do feel like there should be something though, because.
Well, sure.
right now
I'm
there's
just
sort
being
of
the devil's advocate here.
I agree with you on simplicity, for sure. But right now it's sort of a free-for-all situation where I can think of,
It is and
can
it
think of at least a dozen fences that have gone up in Kenema recently, and I don't think any of them have gone through any kind of review.
Oh, I bet yeah. The only way that's going to
Staff
come
or
up is
otherwise.
somebody makes a phone call.
Yeah. So at least, if there is a framework, then there's a little bit of,
Structure to it.
yeah, and then people maybe will be a little more aware of it and more likely to try
Well, that's probably not true because even if you change this up and put certain responsibilities on us or staff, those fences are still going to get built. Just like you said, there's
Right.
fences that are inappropriate that are in your neighborhood that whether you change this up or whatever, they're not going to know any different, right? Until you call and say,
Yeah.
hey man, you call staff and say, I think a fence is going up, it's not appropriate. Then it comes to us, right? So whatever you do here, whether you jazz this up or change it or make colors different, it's still the issue of, do people know about it? Do they know enough to come to the board or to staff and ask?
And that's part of just education.
Education, because, honestly, 90% of the time, people are just going to put a fence up. They don't think they have to get permission. It's just everybody's right to put a fence up. But they don't understand that if they're going to live in a district, that there's certain parameters, right? Just like you can't put vinyl siding on, but some people try. This is a real, what do you do with it all? Because you could take this and print it out and say, come back next month, everybody put their mark where they think staff or HRB should be, and then you disseminate everybody's and say, hey, here's what everybody collectively put together, and this is what it looks like. These are the colors. I don't know.
We could do that.
But then the other issue is wood picket. There's 5, 6, 7 different types of wood picket. So then you have to.
And they have to be wood, not plastic.
Right, but then you take wood picket and you've got, okay, groups A, B, and C, and you have pictures of fence. So people like pictures, but it's like, a lot of people think, what's solid wood vertical board mean?
Well, that's why we've got this guide.
Right, and the spreadsheet's fantastic because it breaks it down based on what you're saying is what's in the code. But I'm not trying to say I don't think this is important. I just think, what do you do when it's done? Does it still have the same effect? I'm just throwing out ideas, that's all.
And do you need to have a building permit for?
Most of the time,
being an
no.
offense? You don't need to.
Not unless it's below
Over-
6 feet.
As long as it's under 6 feet, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was 3 feet in the, on the front.
For retaining walls, like, well, so we have height standards, but
Restriction.
you still don't have to get a building permit.
So here's
Okay.
the deal. If it's a fence, if it's under 6 feet, it does need a permit. If it's a rock wall, if it's over 4 feet, then it needs engineering. Those are the code things. Denise, were you going to say something?
If I may, but I need to.
Please.
You raise your hand. We're all here in one big happy
I know,
family.
well, that's what I'm trying to say. It's just, it's kind of hard when, anyway. I want, Denise McGriffey, anyway, I just want to say, I agree with you, John. I appreciate the effort that went into this, but this is way too complicated. And I would say in most neighborhoods now, we do try to advertise a lot in McLaughlin that, by the way, you do need to have a review by the city. But let me back up a little bit. The reason that the McLaughlin neighborhood, this came to a head for us was about a year ago, I guess. There's a house on 4th Street and they started putting up a chain link fence, and the community members talked to the neighbors and they thought that they needed to have a review. Turned out that code compliance came out. They didn't, they did, it went back and forth. But anyway, so this brought up a conversation in our neighborhood, not in the formal sense, but just discussion. So people, what was brought to our neighborhood association was that we would like to have the fence policy applied to all properties within the conservation district, because the same way that it does to Kenema, because it really looks inconsistent when you've got a designated house with the nice fence, then you got whatever, and then another thing and whatever. And I know that that's a larger topic, but that's really how our request came in, is that we need to look at contributing and non-contributing and how the fence that's going up applies to the neighborhood. And a lot of people in McLaughlin who have designated properties really feel very strongly about the look of the neighborhood. And fences is one way that the neighborhood kind of has a cohesive feel.
If you have a fence at all, yeah.
If you have a fence at all.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying.
Yeah, and you know, you and I have talked about this for years. And so the way, right or wrong, at one time, the way that the fence policy was being looked at was that the fence policy applied to everybody. I have, if I can find them, I don't know whether you have a book. I have resources. I have books about fences and styles and which fence goes with where, and I would whip them out and have, say, people look at them and say, you know, because you've got this situation where you've got, let's say you've got a very plain little simple cottage and somebody wants to put up a very ornate iron fence.
Yeah.
Well, some of the stuff that you showed on the slides, that's just ornamental iron fencing. That's not wrought iron. The Eiffel Tower is made out of wrought iron. The Statue of Liberty has wrought iron in it, but it's a very specific type of material. I mean, you could go down, you could buy one of those at, you know, Home Depot. That's not necessarily wrought iron.
If you Google wrought
Yeah.
iron fence like I did.
Yeah, well, I just Googled it, and it's a very malleable iron, and we have some pieces of wrought iron up at the Holmes house, and unfortunately, it fell over. It's
And
not
it'll probably break.
Well,
can break.
it got a little dented, and it's just a section of one. It's not as a fence, but it's, you know, I thought, oh, holy cow, you know, what am I going to do here? Anyway, so I know somebody that was able to take it and kind of bend it back. So some of this stuff, you really, it's got more steel and aluminum in it. It's not what, you know, but I think in terms of wrought iron, if you've got a house like the Babcock house, or you've got a very ornate Queen Anne Victorian, you probably could have wrought iron. It probably would be very appropriate for that style of house. But for my house, no, I wouldn't put up wrought iron. It wouldn't be appropriate. So I think in some cases you're correct where you should say, have the staff look at it, and if they dispute staff, then they come to you. I mean, I think that would simplify it. The one you should put on that list is the one we don't want to have approved is the twisted iron. And that is very modern, and that's not appropriate for any, you know, older house because it's very, very modern.
The thing of it is economics drives it.
I know it does.
So
I know it
if someone
does.
wants to put up a cedar fence because it's a lot cheaper than if I have to put up something that's appropriate for my house.
Well, but you could do
That's the
cedar
thing.
in your pickets, you know, you could
Oh,
have,
sure.
you know.
But that's not what they're looking at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're just looking at putting up a regular fence.
Yeah.
Or like a good neighbor, one of those good neighbors.
Yeah, and a good neighbor fence in the backyard's really great, and probably in your side yard, but not necessarily in your front yard.
Yeah, and you
if-
came before the board a few years ago. There's that house up here on Malala. It's a small little house on the left.
Yeah, I know which
They
one you're
put that
talking about,
fence
yes,
with
and
the
they put in.
horizontal stuff.
Yeah, and I,
yes.
Right.
and I called Christina and I said, I
Yeah.
didn't think that was appropriate for that style of house. That is a very modern style of fencing.
Right,
And of
it
course,
was-
it's up there and it
And it was
aggravates the
corralling
hell
a
out of
corner
it. Yeah.
property, but the house is a quaint little house.
Yeah.
But the fence is, fortunately, you don't notice the fence so much anymore because you still kind of can see the house with the color.
I see it every time I go up there. Believe me.
Challenge is getting that discussion out in
Yeah,
front
but
of
the one thing I did want to bring up is that since some of you know where I live, so I want to talk a little bit about the rock walls,
Yeah.
because that is one of the character defining features of McLaughlin. We have a lot of stone work done from the WPA days, and basically this picture, that is not basalt. That may be basalt, but that is in a configuration that's completely modern. If you're going to have basalt stone, it needs to be in a configuration that's appropriate to the district. This is, you
Is
know,
this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, this
That's
one.
almost
You're
like one
talking
of
more
those
of a dry
concrete.
stack.
yeah, and mine actually had mortar in it at one time. I think it is a lot of it has fallen out over the last 102 years. But the way that the stones are arranged has a lot to do with, well, like the one on I guess this is my left. That's dry stack. Now mine has a concrete cap on it that they put on, and it's that old style Portland concrete that has all of the little pebbly
Pieces
rocks in there when I had to have
It's
it
exposed.
replaced. Thank God Pioneer Waterproofing knows how to make that, and so I was able to get it to match. But it is something that we don't, I would guess, I would like to not have us encourage the wall that's on the right, unless it's done, in a way that would be more in keeping with McLaughlin. And we have, as you said, I said, numerous examples. I mean, it's everywhere in our neighborhood.
But see, that's something where, let's say somebody came to staff and said, I want to put up a rock wall, and I
And
think
you'd
it's
ask-
really cool. Then you'd say, go look at these 3 houses because that's the best example of
Right.
what we're looking for. And that's a
exactly-
staff thing. And
That's
then you,
exactly what I would have,
Well, and see, the
when people
picture-
ask me, that's what I say. Go look at this place, this place, this place. This is the type of wall that
Right.
you want to have constructed.
When the
And when you're
picture
doing
on the
veneer,
right
it's the same
looks-
thing. You want to put the veneer in so that the veneer looks like it was actually kind of stacked rather than kind of, I don't know what you say, higgledy-piggledy, something like that.
Well,
And
one-
so that's really, appropriate for, there's some stone walls in Kenema as well, but not as
Right.
many as in our neighborhood.
Yeah. One thing I can do, so I pulled photos. I didn't actually want to use photos from Oregon City because, if it's a type of fence that we don't want to allow, we don't want to shame anyone,
Exactly,
right?
I get that.
But what I can do for some of these, preferred
appropriate.
materials, I can take some local pictures and replace these Google images.
Well,
with
on the
those.
ones that you say, this is what we mean, like we did with the design guidelines, this is what we mean when we mean this. And that way you show that, and I don't think anybody, hopefully you can do it in such a way that it, if you need to show somebody's house, because if you came by and took a picture of my wall, I really wouldn't, care. I've been babying the thing for 20 years to make sure that it's all staying up there because it's holding up my entire property. But there are other, the promenade has work on
Yeah.
it. There's that rock wall along South End. There's just lots of places that,
Yeah.
there's lots of good examples. You can say, this is what we mean by that. And I know that there was a building downtown that wanted to basically do that. And it looks great, but it's very modern. It's not old looking at all. So that's really one of the things too. So the other one too has to do with wire fencing. At one time, there was a place in Portland, and I probably have it somewhere in my paperwork, that still sold woven wire. And I was absolutely delighted to find them because somebody wanted to put up a woven wire fence. We all remember my grandma's house had woven wire, but it was a lower one and had the loop on the top. And the one you have in, the picture, that's definitely, woven wire fencing. And I would recommend you call that out because it is a specific type of fencing. The one on the left is, that's, I'd see that out on my in-laws' farm.
That's a cheap version.
You would not see that being used for anybody's, property. It's just, it's really more of a farm. And in farms, they wouldn't use nice wood. They would use just,
What they had.
what do you call them? Those metal stakes, yeah, that's what I meant, the metal stakes, and they would hook them, they'd hook that all together to keep the chickens in or whatever. So that's, again, that's not in Oregon City, so it's just kind of like, okay, that's probably livestock fencing or goat fencing.
Stuff, yeah.
And then the other bigaboo is, I did lots of research on wood lattice, and diagonal lattice really came into being in the 60s. It did not, you would not have seen diagonal lattice per se back in the day. It would have been mostly used not for fencing except for an interior garden. I think they have a lot of square lattice in like Beatrice Potter's garden, and a lot of the English, they used it as trellis material for plants to climb up on. They'd have a beautiful archway, and then you'd have two little pieces of square lattice, and then the plants would all grow in it. But not so much for fencing. You see that being used as the around the bottom of the foundation, underneath your porch, and it's definitely the square stuff. It's not the diagonal stuff. And so for fencing, that's, I don't know about that one. That one you probably need to have more discussion, but it looks lovely on that particular house, but it's not a historic house, and it would be inappropriate in Kenema or McLaughlin because it just,
I would put,
unless you had a beautiful English garden that you were trying to do something in there like that.
instead of wood lattice, I would probably put square wood lattice.
Yeah, be very specific about it.
Lower left one's pretty nice.
Just to define that.
Yeah.
And diagonal should be a separate one. It should be under the nose
Under
with
the
the chain
nose,
link.
yeah. Oh, you're talking about this, that's I forget what you call it.
Oh, the horizontal, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway. So, it's just, it's one of those things. I talked to my neighbor about putting up a good neighbor fence because we have probably a 1920s style chain link fence in the backyard, and it still had the old finials, the solid iron finials on it, and that's the part I like about it. The rest of it I don't like so much, but they're not really inclined to do it, even though I offered to pay for it. But that's something that I wanted to put up, but I came to talk to staff about it. So that's kind of what I have right now. And, then you've got in here stucco. I would not recommend stucco fencing in our climate for any reason, because how well would that hold up? Maybe if you live in Arizona, you might have a stucco
Well, we do
fence.
have a few, like the house down there, that kind of prairie stucco one where the, on Center Street there.
Okay.
Yeah, but stucco fencing is still not appropriate in our conservation district. And
Well, if it matches the house.
it's not about matching the
still-
fence to the house. It's about trying to find a style that would be more appropriate. I'm not aware of examples of stucco,
I don't think there is any.
not in Oregon City, but but there's some research that could be done there. You've got non-basalt stone, and the recycled concrete. I don't know about that either in our,
No,
in our neighborhood.
the wall does not
Neighborhoods.
belong.
The wall.
The
Oh,
wall
that's-
is the
yeah, name of
company.
the company, yeah.
That does not belong in Oregon City, I'm sorry.
And
That's
I've
what I
seen
was,
some,
that's
I've
what,
seen some
to
very
me, that
lovely
wall.
wood, the plastic fences, but you can spot them a mile away. There's one right near my house that got put up about 5 years ago that,
The one under basalt stone, the one on the right, to me looks like the wall.
yeah, it probabably is.
This,
Oh,
the
And then I
wall
guess
was
the
a
other one
company that
I have a
made-
question
they
for you
took, like,
about is
old
So you've got steel or aluminum rail, and that's, that's a very modern version because it's got a top bar on it. And most of the fences from back in the day, they wouldn't have had a top rail on it like that. They would have had a finial, something very decorative that came up. So if you tried to climb over and you weren't supposed to be there, you might injure yourself on the top of the finials.
I like that look. Anyway.
So I will look through my stuff and get some books for you. Also, the other one, do you have a copy of the Virginia McAllister's House Styles book? That is like the Bible.
I'm sure you guys have that. Yeah.
We had one, but I took mine when I left.
I have an extra one if you want.
Yeah, that's a great book. If you guys don't have it, I would definitely get it. It is a fantastic book.
I think I gave you some pages.
She knows everything that there is to know about house styles, and she keeps updating the book all the time, and it's fantastic. She was here about 3-4 years ago giving a talk, which was really amazing. Another resource is Professor Emeritus Don Peeting has done a lot of worked with Phil Dole a lot on fences, and I have one of Phil Dole's books. He was no longer with us, deceased, but he wrote basically the book on fencing in Oregon, and he did a lot of research on fences. I have that in my collection somewhere. And if I think of anything else, I'll let you know, because that's what I did. I just started collecting the stuff, and that way I could go open a book up and I could go, okay, well, here's this or here's that. And usually what happened was somebody would come in with a very simple house and want super, super ornate, fence that would be for a Queen Anne. And, the more you put the cuts in them, the more expensive the picket is. So a lot of times I could say, well, if you got a simpler style, that would cost you less money. And that always maybe worked. But, again, I agree with you, John. I think simplifying that chart is going to be easier. And if I have a question that I can't answer and somebody asks me, I usually call, discuss it with Christina or Kelly, and I say, hey, somebody's talking about doing this. What do you think? This is what I told them. This is what I think. And it usually kind of gets worked out. So we'll look forward to having a broader discussion. And yes, my all-time favorite, split rail. Doesn't work here because we're not out on the prairie.
I like it though.
Or Abraham Lincoln's house, which actually does have a split rail. His childhood home in Springfield has a split rail fence all around. So if I think anything else, I'll tell Kelly.
Thanks, Denise.
The challenge in all of this still is getting out in front of the citizens so that they know this before they build it. How do you do that?
Well,
We tell people in real estate, we tell people every day, if you're buying here, you need to do this.
we do have the
And then a
homeowners
week
packets.
after they close, they're out in the yard doing
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Happens regularly.
And we do have those brochures that I think I showed you at the beginning of the year. We mailed those out to every historic property owner, and we get when properties change hands, we get the new owner information every quarter from the tax assessor. And I have extra brochures that I plan on mailing out every time we get that list. So, that's one way we communicate. And then also with this process, I do plan on doing a simple postcard or just letter mailing to let people know that we're proposing changes to the policies and we're having this open house. So that'll be yet another reminder for folks that, this is regulated and you can participate even.
What about, the Trail News comes out just 4 times a year? What if they, I don't know how much room they have or, what the cost would be to add an additional, but to have just a page on historic preservation, because it is so pervasive through the city, and just have hints or, informational, like one time it could be on fences, one time it could be on, landscaping, I mean, just, or windows,
Right.
there's quite a,
Right, yeah, that's a good idea. And
and it goes to everybody, so
Right.
I mean,
and May is Preservation Month, so I
Right.
think we should make sure we get in the spring edition of Trail News and we can probably
and then maybe
get more space.
see, I don't know, Denise is the one that does that, does Denise Conrad.
On our
And we could-
Facebook page.
Okay.
We could post some of that on our Facebook page and just leave it there.
One of the things Paul Edgar Kanema, one of the things I'd love to see happen sometime is to get our Kanema National Register nomination document given to all of the new owners in the sense of just trying to instill into their heads
Sense of pride.
that they have just bought into or going into a historic district and that it has National Register status and why. What is there about it that, why did Kanema become a National Register district? And it's part of in trying to instill some education or some pride into them about here we are and we're all kind of gathering together. And one of the issues is to not degrade or to be doing something that is inconsistent with what is what is in the district. And so again, I'm with you guys in this education thing. This is, to me, it's how do we consistently try to provide people with a better knowledge of why is Oregon City important? What are some of these buildings? Why is the McLaughlin Historic District? And what are some of the things we're trying to protect? So I had talked with Denise one day and we were talking about, like when people come up South Second, there's a concrete block wall that the guy's trying to put on the right-hand or the left-hand side right there on that deal. But it's an entry-level place where people kind of create a vision or they're now going into the McLaughlin district. And so it's kind of like we want to try to create some degree of impression with them that this is important or this is the standards or something that we're doing. And I see these old rounded out block walls that are, to me, are just totally inappropriate for what we're trying to project. And so some of this stuff is about trying to project what is consistent with historic districts. And this is where I would go along with Denise saying, we can't have it all slipshod. We should try to have some degree of consistency within this, because what we're really trying to do is protect districts like Kanema and not have the death of 1,000 cuts where all of a sudden we keep on going down and pretty soon there's no reason whatsoever for even having the district. And that's the reason why educating somebody with the nomination document and some of the other guidelines as to what are kind of guidelines that are part of doing things. So somebody comes in and says, okay, I just bought this lot and I've got property rights and I want to do what I want to do. I can put up any type of fence or wall or I'll use concrete block or I'll do anything. Somewhere along the line, we've got to try to head that off before where everybody gets pissed off at each other.
Well, the question I have for you is, do either associations work with or talk to the local realtors and set up little workshops or provide information? So when they're looking at...
And they record, don't they?
I mean, we have the fortune of having a realtor who lives in one of the districts, but there are lots of other realtors.
We do on occasion, Ray. We've got at least 3 realtors that are very, very familiar with the requirements and everything in the district, and they are very good about talking to folks. It's when we get, realtors who are from outside of our area that don't really know.
And that's where my follow-up would be working with the Realtors Association.
We have tried that.
We tried to get it to where when they bought a house, if it was a designated house, it had to be disclosed. And
we tried to get that.
We tried to get that. I don't think they
It
never.
is.
It is still. It is.
It is required. required.
It is required?
That is a
I did-
material.
Thank
Remember
you.
when Dan was the chair of the HRB, he wanted to see if we could somehow get some grant money to put a notice on all of the houses and their deeds that said, by the way, it's historic. We could never quite get enough money. We even had worked out a deal with the county recorder to get a reduced fee if we did them, all. But we just couldn't get enough money together to do that. But Ken, you said, if you had a dollar for every time you said, you and I could be retiring to some other sunny climate. It happens all the time. I think part of it is that the more people in the neighborhood are aware about it, people are sometimes so afraid to talk to their neighbor. You don't want to go up and tell them they're doing something wrong, but it's kind of like, well, by the way, were you aware that yada, yada, yada?
Well, an example is we have this rock wall on 4th Avenue between Miller Street and Ganong Street. It's said to be made out of ship captain's ballast wall right there. And so that wall that's right there has been very important, and it's the stones on it are important. And right above it is where the original court, the first judge appointed to the Oregon Territory, had a house right in there. And there's a hole there. And I remember when the guy developer got in there, he just quickly ran the plow through the whole thing because he didn't want anybody to find anything. And I have as an example at my house, when I was digging out under the living room of the house built in 1880, all of a sudden I found a shaving stone, a pickaxe stone from native deals that could date back thousands of years. And it was right under my deal. And so as we're digging it out, it was actually a campsite of early Native Americans under my living room.
I think we're drifting off topic.
Yeah, but anyway,
here.
we've got to know some of this stuff.
Well, the education thing, like I said, we could post on our website, a Facebook page, here are the requirements. Do you guys still get grant money to do the once a year mailing to everybody? Because the last little newsletter that you guys did, that was fantastic. I still have extra copies, and I give them out to people.
We do have extras of those that will go out when property changes hands.
Right.
And until those copies run out, but we have a lot of copies.
That's helpful.
And so we get the CLG grant
Right.
every 2 years, and that was a one-time use of that grant.
Yeah, see, we were able to do that. That's why we did it every year. From the time that Kathy Galbraith was planning director, we had a CLG grant. Till the time I left, we got it every year, and that was one of the requirements is that we did that mailing every year. And about 96 is when we had the big gap where it didn't get done and they didn't get mailed at all until this one that Christina did. I mean, there was a number of years, there was just nothing came out. But it's, as Ken would say, it's a constant, continual over and over. And I mean, we're never going to get done educating people because it's just the same. But again, I had a new neighbor and I mentioned to them, by the way, here's your designated house. And so we got to talking. He said, I want to put up a picket fence. And I said, that's really great. Here's the policies. I happen to have copies, and I gave it to him. And the fence he put up is fantastic. It's a great little fence. It's perfect.
I think there's 2 levels of this. When you talk about the home itself,
Right.
people generally understand that they at least need to go to the planning office and ask the question. But like John said, when you're talking about a fence, people just put up fence.
It doesn't connect.
It doesn't occur to them
I would agree. Some people don't, but most people do. They connect it because it's all about the historic property. It's what I find is that the roofs is really the big issue. The roofing.
I kind of think, is it more of a historic property, or do they think of it as a historic home?
It's a
And
property.
that fence isn't part of the home, it's part of the property, and so they just put up a fence.
Yeah, it's part of the.
That's why I think,
But they're
Well,
the
doing something
mindset.
in trail news that goes out to
I think that's good, that's the best
everybody,
option. to
you know, and
help
it's,
with
a-
that.
and do, just have, you know, or it could even be like a half page or something, you know, but I think just getting that kind of information, because, I mean, our historic character defines Oregon City, and so I think.
What
you
about
know,
on the website, city's website?
Well, but not
I
everybody.
mean, not where you go into
With the-
dig deep, but
No, no,
something that
no.
pops up, you know?
Right, but I think, you know, the trail news goes out to everybody, and
But
so
do they read
I
it?
think it also educates them that, oh, there's a reason for this, you know, and so,
Maybe there's
What's
a
the
need for, to have fences in historic districts, pay a small permit fee and have them go up and get that initial view or something like, I don't know, but I would rather have, I see so much stuff going up all over Kenema and around, and a lot of it's very inconsistent, and none of us want to say anything because it's some personal neighbor, you know, so it's not in our purview to do it. And I would rather have it, much like what John is saying, have it go, at least we can blame you.
But I say, see, I disagree with you on that. I think that why should we always have to call the city and say, hey, so-and-so's doing X, when maybe a very friendly, you know, by the way, were you aware that the city has some fence? I don't know how you say it, but you know what I'm talking about, Grant. You're not.
Then
It's difficult, it's a difficult balance.
It is. It's a very difficult balance.
and it all depends on who you're talking to, too.
Well, I agree. I agree. But
There's people.
So to
in
tie
it.
it, tie it back
We're
to
kind of running against the
I
clock
know.
here. And I wanted to end with some direction as to what we're going to do next. And John had the suggestion of redlining the matrix chart here, and that's a minor step. Does anyone have a suggestion from the standpoint of a next work session? How, we've talked about specific issues tonight. How do we address them?
I guess my couple of comments would be that I'm on board with, well, one, yes, redlining, but I think trying to simplify maybe, and perhaps we kind of keep some of the common types that are preferred, and then anything else goes to special, just to kind of maybe eliminate some complexity.
But then we should also within that have, like, no chain link, or,
Right.
you know, that
Yeah,
type
maybe,
of,
specific
you know, have,
that are preferred and non-preferred, and then
and
anything
then
else is sort of-
prohibited, or, you know,
Yeah.
at least on the front, you know, and stuff.
I want to make it simple enough, you know, even someone like us, you know, has to look up to try to figure out what some of these things actually are, you know, in reality. And so you know, to get along the education issues, to get compliance, to want to follow the policy, it's got to be easy to follow both for the homeowners and for the staff. And the more complex we make it, the more likely they are to just ignore it, I think, so.
Well, like at the bottom, you know, there's different ones. I think like with the concrete block and, you know, all of that, if you just say this is prohibited, you know, like concrete block and that kind of stuff, you know, for the front, it's just no. So you eliminate a third of your chart, you know, which, because when you look at it, yes, it's kind of small, but it's also, you have to really kind of dig down deep and try to figure it out. It's not easy
And you
to,
could do the same thing for the wood lattice, put the little asterisk in
Yeah.
the bottom.
and just, you know, the ones, these are allowed. Any kind of other variations have to come to the board, and these are not allowed. What do you guys think?
As long as we're staying away from redlining. I work for a bank, and redlining in the banking industry is not a good term.
What's red line?
It has to do with the Community Investment Act, but they were talking
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
about relying on another level.
So it sounds like we can maybe simplify the table. So we started off, we currently have a policy that doesn't identify different property types. And then last meeting, we talked about, well, we should really apply the fence
appropriate
policy
for the
based on the architectural style. So it sounds like we might want to step back from that, but maybe we can do it in narrative form, potentially where we have a purpose statement that talks about, you know, the following fence types, like the wrought iron, are appropriate on these architectural styles only. And so, I mean, I'm happy to draft something up like that takes a little bit of this, the slight differences based on the architectural styles and put it into a little bit more of a narrative form that still gives people some guidance, and then, you know, make the table a lot more simple.
Simple. Not as complex, yeah.
Right.
Having that complexity really makes it hard.
What
I
about,
know, they're basically saying what the.
I'm sorry to interrupt. What about the idea, you're using the fence style to dictate what the review is, and shouldn't the house type dictate what the fence is?
That's what, yeah.
So, you know, you think about your guidelines, they're laid out by bungalow style, and that's all the things you can do with a bungalow house. And then you got, you know, your vernacular, and here's all the things. Why couldn't you just have under bungalow, here's the type of fences? Under craftsman, here's the type of fence.
Well, that's
And then-
essentially what.
So then that
I mean,
way
I
we know what
understand,
kind of
that's essentially
house.
what you have here, but it would be like reversed and in a narrative form instead of, you
So
know.
almost like a
And
style
so
guide.
so it goes with your guide, so it's laid out in the same way as your guidelines.
Well-
And maybe that's the way,
Nothing should be narrative, it should be pictorial.
well, you're right.
Narrative with some examples
Yeah,
of.
but we're all
you know.
simpletons and people like pictures, especially with things that are,
Well,
And
and
that's
if
what
they're
a
not
style guide
familiar
is,
with
is
it,
I like
If-
pictures.
if they're not familiar with it, it
Yeah.
helps their,
Oh,
the
yeah, that's what it
translation a
looks
lot
like.
better.
Yeah, that's, anyway. Sounds like the gist is keep it simple, stupid, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Gary, have you seen the format for the design guidelines? But that's what you're talking about.
I'm talking, yeah.
It has a thing where it says, this is good, you know, this is appropriate, this is not appropriate. And then there's a picture. That's-
Or 2 or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pictures are fantastic.
And, you know, I mean, if you had the pictures that showed the building of that style with that fence, then that would be even better, because then you're like actually merging the two together.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the way you wanted to go.
There's a little bit of gray, 'cause there's.
No, there's always gray.
This whole thing's
Well,
gray, man.
vernacular, you know, I mean,
And I mean, but I appreciate the difficulty of finding photos, and I'm not suggesting, you know, all I was saying was that if it followed the guidelines, then when people say, oh, I want to build a fence, where should I go? Well, I go to that vernacular. Well, I know my house is vernacular, so I'll go to that part of the fence. Mm-hmm. You know, just like you would for a roof, or just like you would for windows, or just like you would for.
Is that something you can take a run at then before? I think our next meeting is probably late January.
It is, yeah. And I'm happy to do that. I do want to warn you though, just thinking about it now, it's going to be a long document. I mean, it's not going to, it's going to be this, but spread over lots of pages.
Pictures are gonna
with
make it long.
pictures. And so it'll be a more user-friendly document, but it still will be long. Just a word of warning.
Okay, well, we're gonna take our break,
Yeah.
so,
God, I gotta inhale, I'm such a swole.
yeah. And we
Okay.
will reconvene at 7:30.